So, Perk, what is your word of the day to describe Jimmy Himmy Butler?
Well, I'm keeping it real simple today, and it's inconceivable. That's what it was, inconceivable. Jimmy Butler did the unthinkable. Nobody thought that he would come out there and put on this type of performance that he did last night.
Jimmy Himmy Butler has always been one of the toughest players in the NBA. He's not usually the guy dropping, 50 points every night. He's not the guy shooting 10 threes a game or anything. He's definitely not the player who's going to spend the entire regular season trying to prove that he's the best player in the league. But when the playoffs arrive, something changes. Jimmy Butler becomes a completely different player, and we saw perhaps the greatest example of that in 2023. Because in the 2023 NBA playoffs, Jimmy Butler took an 8th seed Miami Heat team and somehow carried them all the way to the NBA Finals. They weren't supposed to get there. They weren't even supposed to make it out of the first round. And yet, somehow, Jimmy Butler kept finding a way. So today, let's go back and look at just how good Jimmy Butler really was during the 2023 playoffs. Because when you actually look at what he did, it might be one of the greatest playoff runs ever. I'm definitely saying that it was the greatest playoff run of all time. But let's start at the beginning. The Miami Heat entered the 2023 playoffs as the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, and that already made their situation difficult. They had to go through the play-in tournament just to get into the playoffs. After losing their first play-in game to Atlanta, Miami defeated the Bulls to officially secure the 8th seed. And the reward? The Milwaukee Bucks, the team with the best record in the NBA. The Bucks had won 58 games during the regular season. They had Giannis Antetokounmpo, they had Drew Holiday, they had Chris Middleton, they had championship experience, and most importantly, they were expected to destroy Miami. Almost nobody expected the Miami Heat to win this series, but Jimmy Butler clearly didn't get that memo. Game 1 immediately showed what kind of series this was going to be. Miami went into Milwaukee and won 130 to 117. Jimmy Butler finished with 35 points, 11 assists, and 5 rebounds. And this wasn't some random hot shooting night. Jimmy was attacking Milwaukee's defense over and over again. He was getting into the paint. He was drawing fouls. He was making difficult shots. And he was controlling the game. But the Bucks weren't going to go away. Game 2 went to Milwaukee. And then Game 3 came. Miami won by 22 points. And Jimmy Butler had 30. Suddenly, the 8th seed was up 2-1 against the best team in the NBA. But Game 4 is where things got ridiculous. In Game 4, Jimmy Butler scored 56 points. 56! That was a Miami Heat playoff record at the time. He shot 19 for 28 from the field and lived at the free throw line. And the craziest part is that Miami needed almost every single one of those points. The Heat defeated Milwaukee 119-114. Now the Heat had a 3-1 series lead, an 8th seed against the best team in basketball, one win away from eliminating them. But Milwaukee wasn't done. The Bucks forced overtime in Game 5. Miami needed someone to step up. And once again, it was Jimmy Butler. He finished with 42 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals. He finished with 42 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals. And then came one of the most iconic plays of the entire 2023 playoffs. With Miami down by 2 points in the final seconds of regulation, Jimmy Butler caught the ball near the basket. He turned, he rose up, and somehow he got the shot to fall while falling in midair. The game was tied. You know what that means? Overtime. The Miami Heat eventually won 128 to 126, and just like that, The 8th seeded Miami Heat had eliminated the Milwaukee Bucks, the biggest upset of the playoffs, and Jimmy Butler was the main reason why. Across the 5-game series, Jimmy Butler averaged 37.6 points, 6 boards, and 5 assists per game. He shot nearly 60% from the field, and against one of the best defenses in the league, Jimmy Butler looked almost unstoppable. But here's what made the run even more impressive. The Miami Heat wasn't supposed to be a championship contender. This wasn't a super team. This wasn't a team loaded with 5 All-Stars. Their second leading scorer during the regular season was Bam Adebayo. Their roster was filled with players who had gone undrafted or had relatively limited NBA experience. And yet Jimmy Butler made them believe they could beat anybody. After eliminating the Bucks, the Miami Heat moved on to the second round. Their opponent, the New York Knicks. And this series was suddenly different. New York was physical. They defended hard. They weren't gonna let Jimmy Butler simply walk into the paint every possession. And the Heat had another problem. Jimmy Butler wasn't completely healthy. He had suffered an ankle injury during the first round, so naturally, people started wondering whether the Heat's magical run was finally going to end. The Knicks won Game 2, but the Heat eventually won the series in 6 games, and Jimmy Butler wasn't putting up the ridiculous numbers he had against Milwaukee, but he was still doing everything: scoring, rebounding, passing, defending, drawing fouls, controlling the pace, and most importantly, making the right play. That's something people sometimes forget about Jimmy Butler. His value isn't completely captured by his scoring average. Jimmy Butler can have a 22-point game and still be the best player on the floor because he's constantly making winning plays. And that became extremely important when Miami reached the Eastern Conference Finals, because waiting for them was Boston. The Celtics had been to the finals the previous season. They had Jason Tatum, and they had Jaylen Brown. They had one of the deepest rosters in basketball. And once again, the Miami Heat was the underdog. But somehow, the Miami Heat won the first 3 games. The Heat were up 3-0, and Jimmy Butler was once again at the center of everything. He wasn't shooting the lights out like he had against Milwaukee, but he was attacking Boston's defense. He was getting to the free throw line. He was creating shots for teammates, and he was making huge defensive plays. Miami looked like they were about to complete one of the greatest playoff runs ever. An 8th seed was about to reach the NBA Finals. However, Boston refused to quit. The Celtics won Game 4, then Game 5, then Game 6. Suddenly, the series was tied 3-3, and now Jimmy Butler had to face one of the biggest moments of his career. Game 7, Boston Garden. Win, and you're going to the NBA Finals. Lose, and the greatest Cinderella run of this season is over. Miami won, and Jimmy Butler finished the game with 28 points, 7 boards, and 6 assists. It wasn't his most efficient game, but it didn't have to be. He helped Miami survive, and that's the entire story of Jimmy Butler's 2023 playoff run. It wasn't always about having the biggest scoring performance. It was about making the play Miami needed. Over the course of 7 games against Boston, Jimmy Butler averaged 25, 7, and 6. But more importantly, Miami won the series. They were going to the NBA Finals, an 8th seed. Nobody expected this. Nobody predicted it. And Jimmy Butler was one of the biggest reasons it happened. But then came the NBA Finals, and this is where the story becomes more complicated. The Miami Heat faced the Denver Nuggets. Denver had Nikola Jokic. They had Jamal Murray. They had a massive front court. They were playing some of the best basketball in the NBA. Jimmy Butler wasn't the same unstoppable scorer we saw against Milwaukee. Denver's defense made life extremely difficult, and Jimmy's ankle was still an issue, but he continued to fight. In Game 5 of the Finals, the Miami Heat was facing elimination. Jimmy Butler had a chance to change the game. He finished with 21 points, 3 rebounds, and 9 assists. But Denver won the game. The Nuggets were NBA champions, and Miami's incredible run was finally over. But even though Jimmy Butler didn't win the championship, that shouldn't erase what he accomplished. Think about the path Miami had to take. They started as an 8th seed. They had to survive the play-in tournament. Then they faced the team with the best record in the NBA, the Milwaukee Bucks, in the first round. Then the Knicks. Then the Celtics. They just so happened to run into the Nuggets. In my opinion, this was one of the greatest, if not the greatest playoff run of all time. They slayed all the demons in the playoffs. And before they even got to the playoffs, they weren't good in the regular season. And then they went to the play-in tournament and lost to the Hawks and snuck their way into the playoffs. After this magical run from the Miami Heat, every team looks at the play-in tournament very differently now. Because if you even make it to the play-in tournament, at least you know you have a chance. Because Jimmy Butler proved that this season. That's why Jimmy Butler in 2023 was one of the best players of this generation. Let me know what other NBA videos or NBA players you guys will see me talk about next. And I'll see you guys in the next video.